Following the blockbuster trade that sent Damian Lillard to the Milwaukee Bucks, a multitude of reports dropped that give the real reason as to why the Toronto Raptors could not close a deal with the Portland Trail Blazers and acquire Damian Lillard, sending him up north. Additionally, we have some insight in terms of the packages Toronto was sending over to the Portland Trail Blazers and a whole bunch more in this video. But basically, a lot of people want to know, how did this deal fall through? Is the Toronto Raptors, yes, have a lot of talented pieces, have a lot of talented players Raptors fans should be excited about. However, the current roster as is still a little bit confusing. Not a lot of shooting, very imbalanced in terms of guard depth and all that type of stuff, and adding Damian Lillard seemed like it could be a piece that really turns the needle for this Toronto Raptors, moves the needle for the Toronto Raptors if we didn't have to give up too many assets. So Raptors fans are questioning, why didn't the deal go down? I mean, we were so close to acquiring Damian Lillard. Shams even tweeted it a minute before the official trade ended up happening. He had it saved in the drafts, ready to go, and somehow the Toronto Raptors could not close this package. So Raptors fans are questioning as to why, and there's a bunch of reports that all sort of combine together, give the real reason. It starts off with basically one that, a lot of people have basically been talking about immediately after it happened, as Brian Windhorst essentially said that he feels pretty strongly that there was some sort of offer for from Toronto to Portland, but he does not feel strongly, however, that OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, or Scotty Barnes were in that offer. Now, this is interesting because we all sort of were of the opinion. I didn't see many Raptors fans out there even believing for a second that the Raptors would be able to acquire Damian Lillard without one of Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, or Pascal Siakam in that deal. And if we're acquiring Dame and we don't want to give up our future or something along those lines, a lot of people pictured Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam staying. So it was under the assumption, especially with how coveted the OG Anunoby has been by the Portland Trailblazers, that he was for sure going to be in any package going to Portland if a deal were to go down. Well, we heard more and more indications about the true status of OG Anunoby sort of being on the trade block and all that type of stuff, as basically this is coming out from the Toronto Star saying that it ended up being the case. League sources mused Toronto simply would not dangle OG Anunoby for Damian Lillard. So where does this leave Toronto? Toronto enters season 29, far from being considered a contender, all that type of stuff. But basically, the Raptors wouldn't even dangle OG Anunoby in any type of trade talks with the Portland Trailblazers. They weren't considering it. They weren't fathoming the possibility of trading OG Anunoby to get Damian Lillard in return. Masai said, forget free agency. Forget that Pascal, OG, Gary Trent Jr. all free agents next season. Doesn't matter. We want OG Anunoby on this team, and they almost got a deal done, right? If they were that close, and almost kept Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam, which would have been absolute madness. Now, you can criticize, we'll analyze further, but basically the reports continue as this is coming out from Michael Grange, saying that one Western Conference executive basically said that they were hoping to construct a deal that would not include their core pieces, OG, Scotty Barnes, and Pascal Siakam. And that was the sticking point, and you could see that Lillard, with existing talent, it could work if we kept those three guys and Damian Lillard in an uneven Eastern Conference. And Michael Grange ends up going on to say that for a brief moment, there seemed the possibility that the Raptors were going pretty deep into their future asset base, and I think as many as 3 first-round picks, 2 pick swaps, and rookie forward Grady Dick in order to acquire Lillard, the 33-year-old guard, and can single-handedly ignite an offense, but is owed $260 million left on his contract. So basically, putting all these things together, and we also have heard rumors that a potential package was Grady Dick, Gary Trent Jr., and Precious Achiuwa. That's something I've heard from Estefari. I believe he came out and said that. I'm not sure what his sources are along those lines, but Grange is basically coming out and saying that the packages looked more like future assets, pieces that did not include players that were win now. Masai Ujiri said if we're acquiring Damian Lillard, we're keeping all of our starting guys. We're keeping all of our dudes that are in that sort of core lineup, and he wanted a starting unit of Damian Lillard, Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, and Jakob Poeltl. And frankly, that would have been nasty. That would have been absolutely ferocious, but giving up that many future assets, going all in, banking the farm on acquiring Damian Lillard, not only 5 picks, right? 3 picks and 2 pick swaps, but also Grady Dick. that is a huge risk. That is a massive, massive sort of haul you're pitching to make for Damian Lillard. And I'm surprised the Portland Trailblazers didn't take it. Now, I mean, they get Drew Holiday, who is a piece that could also command other options out there on the open market. I would have imagined DeAndre Ayton would have also been able to go to the Portland Trailblazers in this potential package. So they're getting all that and DeAndre Ayton. But I digress. And 3 first-round picks from the Bucks. So we are competitive there. It depends on what Drew Holiday's open market value is. Again, his open market value confuses me now at this point, given the fact he said he's willing to retire after his current contract. So I won't dive into that too much in this video. But basically, the Raptors had a very comparable package, but they were looking at very much future assets. And the Blazers sort of received in the real package they got a mix of both, right? Ayton as well as Drew Holiday, and then all that draft capital and all that type of stuff. And they could flip Drew Holiday, which they're planning on doing for some future pieces. But basically, the real reason as to why the Toronto Raptors were not going to get Dame is because they were unwilling to trade OG Anunoby. And this is something that has been a sticking point for a lot of Toronto Raptors fans. No one wants to give up OG Anunoby, even though he's a free agent, even though there's a massive risk with him wanting the ball in his hands a lot more coming the start of the season and, in his next contract and all that type of stuff. The Toronto Raptors were not willing to deal him away, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because this could go one of two ways, right? I am a firm believer the Toronto Raptors have a ton of talent on this roster. They have a ton of pieces that are really good. However, they don't fit perfectly together. And maybe under a new coach in Darko Rajakovic, things can sort of gel more smoothly than they did last season. But things didn't work last year, and the talent, we weren't getting the most out of it. And frankly, because of this, Fred VanVleet ended up walking for nothing, right? The team didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to bring him back, all that type of stuff. We weren't winning games. Fred VanVleet ended up walking. Now with Gary, OG, Pascal, free agents come next offseason. If they feel like Toronto's a position where they're not going to have their value maximized, they're not going to live up to their fullest potential, you're taking a major risk sort of going into the season with the roster. A little bit even more confusing because even though Fred VanVleet was certainly inconsistent, he was a lot better shooter than Dennis Schroeder. So it's, the Raptors don't have a lot of floor spacing. There's a lot of confusion. Scotty Barnes isn't that great of a shooter either, and we're hoping he takes a step forward and all that type of stuff. So you're taking a major risk with the sort of roster that we're currently doing by essentially being unwilling to give up one of these core pieces. And, again, then there's the other hand. We have a lot of talent, and if people are coveting your assets, it makes sense to just try and figure it out with your current roster. But, the fact that the Toronto Raptors were unwilling to give up OG Anunoby, right? No matter what type of package, all the future assets, all the stuff in the future, it didn't matter for the Portland Trailblazers because they ended up going the route of Giannis Antetokounmpo, and probably a little minor reason to sort of end off the video. People might be commenting it as well. Basically, there's also some rumors, some chatter that a deal was done, but then Dame basically vocalized how he only wants to go to Miami and stuff. But the Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets, apparently Dame's agent quietly said to other teams that he was willing to go to those two organizations. So maybe the Blazers did him a solid. Maybe it was the only teams he'd be willing to play for, be professional for. We don't really know solidified reports onto that, but just another little reason as to why the Raptors were sort of put aback in terms of potentially landing Dame. But definitely some madness, a hectic day in the NBA world. The Toronto Raptors definitely have some things to figure out, whether it be on the court, in terms of coaching, strategy or stuff, or Masai Ujiri in the front office trying to piece together this roster as we enter the start of the NBA season. But folks, let me know what you guys think about all this Damian Lillard drama. You guys are the best to make it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Very close to 30,000 subs. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.